Welcome to Byline Investigates. My name is Graham Johnson, and today we're going to talk about Rebekah Brooks, who is Rupert Murdoch's chief executive in the UK, and a court case which she's involved in, involving misuse of private information and private investigators. So I'm stood outside of the Rolls building, which is part of the Royal Courts of Justice. And this is not a criminal court. This is not like the Old Bailey or the Crown Court. These are civil courts where people sue each other. And they usually sue each other over injustices to do with preferred goods like money, health, reputation, breach of contract, these kind of things, and people come to the courts in order to get a fair distribution of these goods. Now, the good that we're going to talk about today is privacy. You may have thought the phone hacking scandal ended 8 years ago when the News of the World closed down, or when Rebekah Brooks was acquitted of phone hacking at the Old Bailey, and then she went back to her job as chief executive of News UK. And you may have thought that was the end of it. Well, that wasn't the end of it, because what happened is that the action basically moved from the criminal sector, which is the police and the CPS and the criminal courts, over into the civil courts. And around a decade ago, hundreds of people began suing news group newspapers for phone hacking and misuse of private information, getting access to phone bills and medical records and all kinds of confidential information which was used to write stories in the News of the World. Some claimants alleged the Sun. Those cases have been rumbling on in this court behind me for nearly a decade. What's different about this case is this is not the company which is being sued, i.e. news group newspapers. Rebekah Brooks, who's one of Britain's most powerful, but also one of the most controversial media executives, she's being sued personally for misuse of private information. So to give you a bit of background on Rebekah Brooks, she was editor of the News of the World from 2000 to 2003. And then after that, she became editor of its sister paper, The Sun. It's the daily tabloid owned by Rupert Murdoch in London. And then after that, she went on to be the chief executive of the publishing company which owns those assets, including the Times and the Sunday Times, called News International. That's changed its name to News UK, but she's still the chief executive. She went on trial at the Old Bailey for 7 months in 2014, where she was accused of phone hacking and perversion of the course of justice. She was cleared of all those charges. She was found not guilty of any crimes connected to her time at the News of the World. Now, zoom forward to 2019, Rebekah Brooks is being sued personally, and she's being sued not by another corporation or by another powerful business executive. She's being sued by a painter and decorator from Doncaster in South Yorkshire. It is alleged that she was the person who commissioned a private investigator to look into Anthony Harding, who's the claimant. So I've got two documents here. One of them is a particulars of claim. The other one is a defense document, right? So these represent two sides of a story. Basically, it's he says, she says, and that's the nature of a civil case. And it will be, if it goes to trial, it will be a judge who decides who is telling the truth. Obviously, more evidence may be put before the court, or the defendant, Rebekah Brooks, may choose to settle out of court and give Anthony Harding some money and his lawyers some money in order for this to go away. So I will tell you the details of the story contained in the documents that I've just referred to. Anthony Harding is a painter and decorator from Doncaster in South Yorkshire, and he claims that he was just going about his business in 2001 when his privacy was suddenly and inexplicably intruded upon, right? And what he says happened is this: Rebekah Brooks's then fiance, a TV star in his own right, called Ross Kemp, came to visit Doncaster, right? So you may remember Ross Kemp. He became a hit on EastEnders in the 90s when he had a very big part. He played like a TV hard man called Grant Mitchell. And then he became even more famous for making documentaries about gangs, Ross Kemp on gangs, the underworld, and like difficult and violent people all over the world. So Ross Kemp goes to the VIP opening of a pub in Doncaster, and he goes with his former EastEnders co-star Dean Gaffney. Ross Kemp comes back to London and he leaves this note with Tony Harding's number on it in his house he shares with Rebekah Brooks. Rebekah Brooks finds it. Well, what she claims in her statement of her defence is that all of this is irrelevant, right? But what she says is that she, for the record, that her relationship with Ross Kemp, who she was planning to get married to, was on the rocks, and that she was having an affair, and she became suspicious about this number. She uses a private investigator called Steve Whittamore to look into this story, particularly this phone number, the suspicious phone number. Steve Whittamore was one of Britain's biggest private investigators at the time. He began working for newspapers in 1994 and continued till about 2006. And basically, his stock in trade was performing unlawful or illegal checks. So what he would do, he would get ex-directory phone numbers for you. He would convert phone numbers, mobile numbers, and landlines. He would find out who the subscriber is, get the identity of the person behind the number. He would pull their phone bills. He would find out their car registration numbers. He did a hell of a lot of work for the News of the World and all the other papers in Fleet Street. So she used this private investigator to find out who owned this number, right? And it turned out to be Anthony Harding in Doncaster. So what Anthony Harding says is that Steve Whittamore, the private investigator, used illegal or unlawful methods to find out his private information, his home and address from this phone number. So what Rebekah Brooks says in her documents is that, yes, she did use private investigator. However, she didn't ask him to do anything unlawful. She didn't task him to do anything illegal. She only asked him to convert this mobile, which she says can be done legally anyway, right? So you've got the two cases. Anthony Harding says this was done illegally and unlawfully. Rebekah Brooks denies this. So Rebekah Brooks, whenever she's been accused of phone hacking or using private investigators, she's had a story and she's stuck to that story. And the story is this, that she's never used private investigators. And if she did do on a small number of occasions, right, it was to do with public interest investigations into tracking down paedophiles. So you might remember the News of the World ran a paedophile campaign in 2000. It was called the For Sarah campaign, and this resulted in Sarah's Law, which is to do with tracking paedophiles and where they live and so on. So the News of the World were involved in that, and Rebekah Brooks says if she ever used private investigators, it was specifically to do with that story, right? Now, she's told that story to 4 official bodies over the past 16 years. First of all, she told it to a parliamentary select committee, the Culture, Media and Sport Select Committee. In addition to that, she told it to the Press Complaints Commission, which was the regulatory body which oversaw press activity regulation at the News of the World and the Sun those days and during the hacking scandal. Then she told it to the Leveson inquiry, which was into the ethics and practices of the press in 2012. And then she told it to the jury and judge at the Old Bailey when she stood trial for phone hacking in 2014. She's been under a lot of scrutiny, right? But she stuck to that story. She was found not guilty of any crimes connected to her time at the News of the World. Now, zoom forward to 2019 at the High Court of Justice here in the legal quarter of central London, where Rebekah Brooks has now changed her story and said, well, no, she did commission a private detective to do something which wasn't in the public interest. Actually, it was to spy on her fiance, Ross Kemp, right? But what she's saying now is that she didn't ask the private investigator to do anything illegal or unlawful. So it's a different story. Past 16 years, been saying she's never done it. Now she's saying she did it, but if anything illegal happened, she didn't know about it, and certainly she didn't ask anyone to do it. Anthony Harding says this case caused him even more distress. It aggravated his upset because he was wrongfully branded a paedophile. Now, how did that come about? So in a nutshell, what Rebekah Brooks did in a bid to explain this from 2003 onwards for the past 16 years, she said that the only reason she will have tasked a private detective like Steve Whittamore to make such an inquiry is because she would have suspected that Anthony Harding was a paedophile, because the only time she ever tasked private investigators to do these things was when she was running her paedophile campaign for Sarah, or Sarah's Law. So basically, Anthony Harding's name wrongfully, falsely, has been associated with being a child sex offender, and quite rightfully is aggrieved. Now, what Rebekah Brooks says in her defence is that she's never really said this, she's never really said this in a public forum, and if Anthony Harding has been smeared and it's been alleged that he's a paedophile, a spectacular, it's not her fault. That's what she says in her court documents. So if you want any more details about this story, go to our website, bylineinvestigates.com, and you will see a full account of this investigation. You will see a detailed analysis of both Tony Harding's particulars of claim and Rebekah Brooks' defence. And you'll be able to kind of make up your own mind about what you think happened. Please subscribe to our channel, because this helps us continue our investigations into this story, and this will help us continue our investigations into corruption and crime in the British media. Thanks very much. Goodbye.